Well, y'all. Look at us here. We made it through another season. Well, almost. There's more still coming, but I'm so excited for y'all to meet my guest this week. Oh my gosh. I just met her. I have my brother-in-law, Brent, to thank for this connection. I just met her a few minutes before recording this episode, and oh my gosh, I love her so much. She's the Associate Director for Women's Groups for Pure Desire Ministries. She's a certified pastoral sex addiction professional. She has multiple other certificates and things that she does. But here's the thing about this episode is that she is real, she is raw, and she tells her story. I would just like to thank her and her husband for letting their story out in hopes that it will help others. And I truly believe that this episode, specifically around sexual trauma, sex addiction, love addiction, we talk about a lot of different things. I do encourage you to not listen to this episode with any children around. This is a very adult episode, but we real talk. And I think this is needed. This is a needed conversation in Christendom today. We got to have these conversations, y'all, and Ashley Jameson does it with me. So enjoy her from Pure Desire Ministries. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm so excited to meet you. I feel like when yesterday I had read some of your blogs and on Pure Desire on the website. Okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this girl already.
Oh yeah. I haven't written in a while, but our content editor just asked me to do one this month. And the last two I've been like, I'm too busy. I don't think I can do that right now, but I'll muscle in and do another one this month for her.
Well, what I loved about what I would read of yours is that so my husband and I, we pastor in Dallas. We've been doing it for a long time. I think he's 25 years in. I'm about 20 years into ministry, 15 years into local church pastoring. And I just have no tolerance for whitewashing and right. And just making like leaders pretending to be perfect.
Yes.
I'm just so over it. I can't handle it. I want to know people. I want people to know me, and I think the best leadership and the best help we can give somebody else is our own story. And so when Brent pointed me to you and I started reading your stuff, I was like, okay, this is my kind of girl right here. Like you just, you're putting it out there. And I just love that because I feel like so often in Christian culture, it's like hide the things we've been through and act like we have it all together, and we've always had it all together, and that's supposed to help someone?
This is real stuff. I lead a women's group for women who are struggling with love, sex, or relationships right now on Fridays. And it's one of my favorite groups because you get to have these Christian women come and say, I'm struggling with these things. And I have never had a place to be able to openly say I'm struggling with these things. And I want somebody to help me work on it without, condemning me. I've had my boys and their friends over for, little nights where we do kind of like a sex, ed type thing.
Serious? And that's amazing. And your boys are seniors?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're seniors.
Oh, this is
And they're like, Mom, that some of these people are actually having sex. And I'm like, I know. I still want them to come. Like, I want them to come. I want them to learn because Heather and I, we thought of Unraveled and started creating it because we would travel to all these conferences everywhere. And our regular Pure Desire conference, we always give men and women an hour. So the men would go in their own room for an hour and the women would come with Heather and I. And we would hear so many things, just like the things you just listed. I don't like sex. I've been married 40 years. I haven't had an orgasm, or I can't get past betrayal, or I can't. And it's like, the more we dug in, it's like, you're not broken. There's something wrong in either your thinking or something that you were taught, or maybe some trauma. Like there's other pieces. You're not just a broken person.
Oh my gosh, Ashley, that's so good. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're broken just because, the girl in the Notebook's having an orgasm the first time she has sex.
Right.
Which is not possible.
So unrealistic.
So unrealistic. And then Hollywood makes everybody feel like they're broken because I love that. Like, you're not broken. There's things that need unraveling. We've got to dig into some stuff. Oh my gosh, this is so good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. Heather and I, we've robbed the podcast a few times and did women's only episodes. And it's one of our favorite things just because we love talking to real Christian women and helping them with their sex life and like getting to the middle part of that pendulum of I'm not going to be sexually anorexic and I'm also not going to be sexually acting out. Let's get to some health here, but we have to be real and talk about it.
So before I go into because I want to hear your story, and then I want to ask you a bunch of questions about just walking women through these things, but you got to go back to your twin boys and having sex talks with them and their friends. What? So I have two boys. They're 6 and 8. Or no, 7 and 8 now, 7 and 8. So I'm coming up on, and I was just talking to my husband the other day, and I was like, I think it's almost time, for them to just really understand like what's going on with their bodies and, what happens when their pee-pee gets big and they don't know why, or, all these different things. Yeah. So we were having these discussions. They're so cute. One of them came out of the laundry room. Oh my gosh, they're going to listen to this in 18 years and kill me.
But, I have so many podcasts.
Okay. So
my
they
boys
came out. Your boys sound amazing. Oh, they came out of the laundry room the other day, or one of them did, and they were changing in their school clothes. And he comes out and he's like kind of whacking his pee-pee. And he goes, Mom, watch this. Whack. It grows.
Oh my gosh.
And then my other son is like in the other room and he goes, what? And then he's like, what? They grow? And so I'm like, okay, there's no shame about this. There's no shame. There's nothing sexual happening right now. This is all biology. This is physiology. This is something to be celebrated. So I'm just thinking like, okay, how should I respond? I go, that is so cool, but let's talk about that. That's not a show and tell moment.
Right.
But
I one of those little snakes in the water that grow.
Yeah. But it was so sweet to see their innocence surrounding it.
Totally.
And I feel like by the time you reach, I'm 42. I don't know how old you are.
I'm going to be 38 this year.
Okay, so
and that's part of my story too.
We're similar.
Mom.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay. I cannot wait to hear the story. But by the time you're in our age, it has been so shame. Shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of the things. And so I just loved seeing their little innocent, like, whoa, my pee-pee grows. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please like stay.
I know. It's so like, they're so precious at that age.
Feel that celebration about this forever. Like that's so sweet.
Yeah.
But let's backtrack really quick on your story. And then I want to get into some of this nitty gritty, especially for women, because I have the same heart you do for women and sex and approach to sex. But tell me a little bit about your story and how you landed at Pure Desire.
So about 9 years ago, my husband got plugged in here. We were just at, in Coeur d'Alene here. That's where I met Brett and Casey. And he was struggling with pornography. I had hid it for me for 4 or 5 years into our marriage, 4 years into our marriage.
Okay.
And I just like knew there was something off, like, cause I don't know how much people know about pornography, but it quickly becomes a real brain addiction. And so then there's all those addict behaviors that come with it. Sure. Just like if, my husband was addicted to anything else. And so I was just like, gosh, there's something off. Found out he was struggling with pornography, and he actually had a history before me, long history with prostitutes as well. And so I was very devastated.
And you didn't know any of that going into the marriage?
No, there was one exposure that I had, like, oh, there's porn on your computer, like 2 weeks before our marriage. And I like confronted him on it. But he's a wildland firefighter and he was living in the firehouse at that time. So it was easy for him to say, this computer's in the living room. Everybody uses it.
Okay.
And so, but I guess now that I've gone through all the resources and things that, we do at Pure Desire, if I had this brain going back, there would have been lots of red flags, because just learning, healthy relationships.
What would some of those be looking back?
Like lying about things that didn't need to be lied about, like just being like a compulsive liar about catching him in little lies, little ones too, that didn't seem to matter. I would say staying up really late, going to bed after me, staying up really late. And then there was just some times where he would say like, oh, I'm just tired. I'm not feeling very sexual right now, which is like, okay, you're in your 30s. That's really different, Right. So, I mean, not all the time, but just like, there was just little things like that made me, but otherwise I was really, really blindsided, because we did have a pretty good sex life. Like, we were best friends. We got along all the time. We watched a few of our good friends, their marriages fall apart because of porn and affairs. And he would say things like, that's just so dumb. And I can't believe you'd risk his job, so just saying and doing all the right things. But there's just something under the surface bubbling that I could not put my finger on it. So then when I found out he was looking at porn, I found it on his new work phone 4 years into our marriage. It was like shock and grief, but also relief at the same time, because I could tell there was something off. I just didn't know what it was.
You finally had a reason.
Yeah. Like, okay, this has a name now. But then that also quickly turned into hopelessness, because I went to my church. We lived in a very, very small town at the time, like 30 people at the church. Oh, wow. I went to my church and I went to some of the women who had been married forever. And I said, I'm really struggling. Like, I feel so broken. I can't stop crying. Can you help me with this? And I didn't really get help. I got like, oh, well, all marriages struggle and maybe you just need to forgive him. And they did not understand it was, like an addiction, this is not going away without help. Yep. And so I like stopped drinking wine. I canceled all my social media. I read my entire Bible that summer. I was reading 50 to 70 chapters a day. I was like doing everything I could to heal from this broken heart I had. Yeah. But what I found is I would be in my thoughts all day and then I would lash out at my kids. So then I had a lot of anger directed at my kids when they were during that time. Anyways, so fast forward through summer, I started praying that God would just bring us resources that could help us. And my husband got a transfer.
Having conversations with him during this entire time?
Oh yeah, completely.
All the normal ones, I'm guessing, like, why do you need that, or what? Like,
yeah, like all the crazy ones too. Like, I want to know exactly what you look up. I want to know exactly what's better than me. Like, what is it that you're searching that I can't do? So.
You're both worn out.
Yeah, devastated. But he also was gone a lot that summer because he is a wildland firefighter. So I spent a lot of days at home, not even hearing from him. Yeah. Yeah. And so he's like, at that point, he was, I don't know how old he was. He's 44 now. That was 9 years ago. Yeah. So he was 20 years into his addiction, because he started looking at porn when he was like 15 and then prostitutes when he was 18. So he was 20 years into his addiction. So he felt really free. And so
it was freedom to him.
It was freedom,
not just to have broken off from the prostitutes.
Yeah. Like he's just totally free. Like, I don't have to live in secrecy anymore. I've been hiding this from my wife for 4 years. Wow. So he was like going to church and raising his hands. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Like, you just shattered me. So it was, and we do show a graph like that in one of our resources, that it is this like it's the same event that you're both experiencing, but on he's just broken free of 20 years of lying and hiding. Wow. Even though he's discovered. For me, I just found out my whole entire marriage and everything I knew about the person I married was not actually accurate. And so I'm feeling like I don't even know who I married. And so we're at this same event, but looking at it from different sides of the coin. Wow. And so we really had to, I was so devastated. And so after reading all those, reading through my Bible and all that 90 days in, like by the end of summer, I'm like, I am no better. Like, I'm still sitting here all day crying. I don't know what's wrong with me. I felt like my whole life's trauma had come out. And so when we moved up to Coeur d'Alene, there was a Pure Desire group starting. It was like right there. And so I'm like, you're going to join that. It was their first one. They didn't really know what they're doing. But my husband joined it.
Was the group he joined, was that for specifically pornography addiction? Was it for sex addiction?
It's both. Our men's group is both. So whatever you're acting out is, it's unwanted sexual behaviors.
Unwanted sexual behaviors. Okay, great. Okay.
So a lot of men, it is porn, or a lot of men, it's porn and something else, Yep. Yeah. So he joined that and I'm thinking, okay, well, this is going to be good. He's going to get better and then I won't have to be a freak. And that is not what happened. I still was a mess. And so about like 2 months after he joined, he's like, you really need to think about getting yourself help because you're still very depressed. And like, I was in trauma. Like I was in real trauma. I just stare at the wall for like 2 hours and cry and not move and just be frozen. Which was so unlike me. So unlike me. It actually really surprised me. And so I went to the church and I said, I need this group for me as well, the spouses side, Betrayal and Beyond. And they're like, well, we don't have anybody to lead it. You can start it. And so I did. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, if any women want to join me in this room, then here's where I'll be doing this work. And it's, and you can come do it with me. And then from that, other women started asking to be part of the group. And then Brent asked me if I'd come do a group or if I'd come talk to the girls, because some girls had been coming up to Casey and Brent. And when, they were the youth pastors at the time, and they were saying, there's girls struggling with porn.
Absolutely.
We don't know what to do.
Yep.
And so then I started some groups in the youth group. And it was just so crazy because once I opened the door, and I really did not know what I was doing. And one of the counselors said, how have you gotten so many people to come forward? Because 40 girls told me and Casey that they wanted to go through that group.
Wow.
They weren't all actively struggling, but they wanted sexual health. And I was like, this is so amazing. And I said, honestly, it's sharing your story first. If I don't share my story of what I'm struggling with yesterday with these youth group kids, but I do share my story about what I was struggling with when I was 16 and 17 and 18, and letting them know that I understand and it's okay to have a place to talk about it. And so just within 3 years at our church, I think I started over 25 different women's groups, either for the betrayed spouse, the youth girls, or the addict side of women. And I would just start them and identify a leader and give it to the leader, start another one, identify a leader, give it to them. And then I'd oversee it. Yeah, I was still going through it. So it was kind of not traditional way of starting things.
Yeah, but God has a way of doing things untraditionally.
Yeah, because nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but women are the fastest growing demographic of porn users. And only 7% of churches in the United States even have a program for this kind of sexual health. And most of those are for men. So it's like, we just have so many people that just want somebody to say, hey, I've been there. We can work through this. And it doesn't have to be perfect.
That's so good. Wow. Yeah, so you started these groups, and then your husband was in his group at the same time, correct? And then was there I have friends who are in AA, and then also in Al-Anon. Is that Al-Anon? For the ones who love the alcoholic, that whole thing. And so I've always heard such good things about, it's not just the person going through it. The person who loves that person also needs their own type of recovery. And so
it's so systemic. It's a family systems issue.
Yeah.
And that's true. There was a point where my husband and I kind of went to a head because he was so focused on his own recovery. And I said, if you were a single person, it'd be different, but you're married with kids. So there's 3 parts. You as an addict need to heal yourself and gain sobriety. I need to work on my betrayal trauma. And then we need to come back as a couple and figure out how to have a real, authentic marriage, because what we had before was not true.
Right.
And it was based on lies.
Right.
And so we did that. And even doing my work, I realized, oh my gosh, before I married John, I had a bunch of stuff that I just didn't really realize I needed to process, my own love and sex addiction and my own everything. And so I had to then go back and process my own stuff as well, because I had stopped a lot of those behaviors in marriage, but I just traded them for control, overeating, spending compulsively. And I just started medicating in my own way.
In a new way. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so, okay. So talk to me about your own, this is what I love about God. It's he moves us forward in one way, and then it unravels so many other things that we need to clean out or deal with or see and process.
Completely.
So your husband, it sounds like, in his own addictions, kind of I would imagine, correct me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine if I were you, I'd be I'm going to this group because my husband's a mess and he hurt me, he betrayed me. Like you said, I have betrayal trauma. I'm going to get better. And then now all of a sudden here comes these different things from my own life.
Yeah.
And
it was
what were
kind
those
of
and
hard.
I bet, because ultimately I would feel like I'm the one in the right here. I didn't.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, I didn't do something. I didn't do anything wrong. I shop and I eat, but I didn't. Right.
Yeah.
I traded in my vices for but like you were saying, but for you to have the wherewithal to no, okay, I need this group, and wherever this group takes me, my own recovery group takes me, I'm gonna go on that journey. And that, I can't imagine what that must have been like especially for me, who like, I sometimes love to be the victim,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I
love
loved
to be
that for a while too.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So yeah. So can you talk about that too, though? And this is you're a ministry, I'm a ministry. We know this is prevalent. This is probably the number one. Porn and sex addictions are probably the number one thing that are taking out marriages and in the church.
Completely. Yes.
In the church. I
do think it was by the grace of God. And, now that I've been through it and have helped create new content and things like that, I feel like I'm in a place to be able to help women go on to that next step, because they definitely are in here for something that was done to them. And it definitely is trauma. But for me, I've always been just somebody who's not had a problem sharing probably too much of my life with everybody. And so as I'm going through the betrayal trauma work, I'm constantly wrestling with this, like I kept thinking about the story of Hosea and Gomer, and I kept thinking about the prodigal son. And I'm like, as I'm reading and understanding my own trauma and his behaviors, I am feeling grieved and I am processing that. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I have no right. I have slept around with so many people, had my own addictions, eating disorder, drinking too much. I had kids when I was 18. Like there was so much that it was this constant, I felt like just this, those judgment scales of like, I'd be in that victim mode and I was the victim. I was betrayed. He lied to me. I hate lying. I hate it. But at the same time, I have so much of my own past struggles and addiction. I was like, I can also see how it's easy to get caught into something and not know how you got there and not know how to get out. So I just felt like when I was going through the material, I kept going, why does this addict stuff apply to me? I'm in here because I am a victim. This is not okay.
Wow.
So yeah, as I kept learning about the brain and patterns, I'm like, I just kept seeing like big neon signs in my own life. And so I'm supposed to be here processing him and his addiction and my betrayal, but I kept seeing both sides of it on myself, So then I was like, I need to go through a group for myself after this. And that was really healing for me. And I feel like you said, that God brings us to this stuff and then all this other stuff starts unraveling. I just felt like his trauma was just this little weed that was pulled. His betrayal was this little weed that was pulled out, and attached to it was just years and decades of trauma and addiction and betrayal from my family that were attached. And so he's just the thing that like busted the geyser open. Right. And then all my other stuff was coming out. And that's not always the case for every single woman in there. But if I'm leading a group and I see a woman that has both sides, I absolutely say take the first 10 months, because that's how long our groups are, like the bigger groups, and heal from your betrayal trauma. Or I may have somebody in my group, like my Unraveled group, and I'll say, I'm glad you're here for yourself and working on your own struggles and addiction, but I can also hear that you had a big betrayal trauma in your marriage before. So I think after this, you should go through the betrayal and beyond and just give yourself 10 months to process that side of it.
That's so good. Wow. So I heard you mention love addiction. I've been hearing this a lot lately on different, things that I listen to or read. Can you describe love addiction?
Yeah, I guess the simplest way I describe and separate the two between love and sex addiction is you can be both at the same time. So when I was struggling with masturbation, I'd say that was sex addiction, because I was addicted to this chemical component, dopamine. Yep. But on the side with sleeping with men, which sounds so weird, that was all love addiction. I actually was not in it for the sex. I was in it because I was either afraid of rejection, and so I'd compromise my own values and do anything I needed to do, or I was seeking love and I was allowing my body to be used in that way just to feel validated. And so you can hold both at the same time, but if your sexual behaviors are driven by the need to feel wanted, the need to feel loved, the need to avoid feeling abandoned or rejected, then it might be a love addiction at the core. And sex is part of the acting out. Some people have like more of a sex addiction. And, we have scans that show a brain on porn next to a brain with cocaine, and they're both just as holy. And so it is like that drug, like gambling or alcohol or anything like that, where if you're starting to feel low, then you're going to want to act out sexually to bring your brain back up to
the high.
Yeah, to the high. So it can be both. It can be convoluted. When I was 15, I was raped by a 21-year-old man, and I was a virgin. And it was so traumatic. But at the same time, I finally felt like I had somebody that showed me attention. And so it started this love addiction through sex for me.
You started equating at that point.
Right. Like I can get attention this way. So it was never a sex addiction, that part.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is all stuff I learned after.
Faced. Wow. Oh my
processing
goodness.
through my betrayal trauma. I just thought, okay, that's all in the past. Jesus has forgiven me.
Right.
I don't act out in that way anymore. It's not affecting me. And it wasn't until I started using some of the good like cognitive behavior therapy tools and faster scale and our meditations through scripture that I'm like, this is totally still affecting me. I kept, even just like the anger that I had as a young mom and just like the way I'd lash out. I always was looking for those mommy prayer books for more patience and more this and more that. That never worked because that wasn't my issue. My issue was I never learned how to deal with life stresses in a healthy way. And so everything I did was perpetuating an addictive cycle in some way, even though I wasn't still acting out through sex. So the more that I worked on myself and just started living a healthier life and realizing what are healthy coping behaviors and what are unhealthy, and feeding my mind, body, and soul in this healthy way that was pulling me away from those addictive behaviors and mindsets, I became more of a patient mom. I stopped throwing things. So it was like, I didn't just need more try harder to be patient. I needed to fix what was really, really broken deep down inside of me. And then I stopped directing anger at the wrong people.
Wow. Okay. So when you say you fix what was deep down and broken in you, what did that look like practically? Was that like months long? Was that years long? Was that because I'm putting myself in your shoes, I would still be so mad at my husband.
Yeah.
And then I'm mad at God because now he's making me deal with all my stuff that I shouldn't have to be dealing with because I'm hurt.
Oh yeah. I was mad at everybody.
Right. Yeah. So walk me through that process practically. How did you land on the other side of like, I don't need a patience book. I just need to learn how to feed my mind, body, and soul. And then we're going to get through this.
Yeah. And I would say it was months and it was years and it was a process. So that first 2 years, I really, really just tried to heal from the betrayal trauma, but I needed to learn how to have my voice. So that's why my love addiction came in to play, because I realized that my fear of being abandoned was keeping me from saying things or putting my foot down with my husband when I needed to. And, or my, wanting to keep him happy, my people pleasing part of me or whatnot. So I really had to like look at those things. And then there were very practical things like mapping my behaviors. We have all these different tools, like mapping my behaviors. Am I staying up too late? Am I watching too much TV? Am I replaying negative thoughts? And so every day when I had to highlight those behaviors that I was engaging in, I would have a visual to change those things. And so if I found myself walking away from my husband and then replaying the conversation over and over and over and what I could have said and, all this, that was evident because I had just highlighted it on this chart. And now I get to choose, do I want to let this continue to hurt me or do I want to handle it? And sometimes handling it was putting boundaries down. Other times handling it was, I need to do something besides let these like thoughts lasso in my brain. Or if I was snooping through his computer, I would have to ask myself through these tools, am I seeking safety or am I seeking control? Will this help me? What will happen if I find something? What will happen if I don't? What is happening to me as a mom with these little people who are so demanding after I get off the computer and dig through all his stuff?
Wow.
And then I'm just in this crazy bad mood because all my trauma is triggered. And so I had to learn there's time to process it, like with my group, but there's times where I need to be a mom and I need to shelf that. And I need to say, okay, on Monday, I sit down with John and we talk about things from the week and we share these tools. and I can wait till Monday because I don't want this now to rob my day and then make me lash out at my children. And so it was just lots of practical stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then also creating a recovery action plan. So if John relapsed, we went through and we decided, well, what constitutes as a relapse?
Yeah,
and so for me, it was
to ask you,
looking at porn, masturbating, texting any girls on his crew that were not like it's not work related. So those three things would be definite for me. And then we would go through a list of natural consequences, like what happens naturally when you do these things. Nobody has to do it. And I'd say, well, I feel inadequate. I feel betrayed. I feel unloved. I don't feel sexy. My trust is broken. And so then we would create natural or logical consequences after that. And some of it would be, checking in extra during the day, or allowing me to have passwords to certain things, or maybe he needs to, sleep out of the room because it's too hard for me to be laying next to you with like this tornado of emotions in me. So just give me a few days to process with my group members or my friends. And so, I mean, and it could be, okay, well, maybe you need to schedule an extra counseling appointment to try to figure out why you've relapsed again, or, why you're still lying, or we use different tools for each season. And it's just been, I mean, right now I feel like I'm working on having more margin and boundaries because I work full time. And so being present with my kids in the evening, those kinds of things. But back then it was, just like not crying all day, or, it was, or maybe speaking up to John if there was something that was bothering me and not being afraid that it's going to cause conflict.
Was it hard for him when you started the Finding Your Voice?
Yeah,
if he had known you for so long, where you're just make peace,
Yeah, I think it's like had its up and downs, because seeing how much it hurt me to know that he was lying and doing those things. Then there's this kind of like honeymoon period where he's willing to do everything and anything.
Sure.
And then after a few months, you'd be like, well, I don't think I really need to go to group anymore. I'm like, excuse me. Yes, you do till the very end. You're not quitting. And then, there was a relapse pretty late into our recovery, like a few years in, and he had been hiding it for a while. So that one was like a huge major blow, because I thought we were like, I did not know we were back in that place. And I really I kind of went off the deep end. Like I was freaking out, and I was
because you
like
discovered
turning
it
tables.
On your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like flipping things around, and I'm like, this is not okay. I cannot be in a marriage with somebody who's going to keep lying to me. And I just sat him down on the bed. I said, imagine you're in a relationship with somebody for, I think it was like, 10 years at the time or something, for 10 years. And that person constantly lies to you. I was like, would you be a friend with somebody like that? That's just always lying to you and you're not even sure what's true or not? He's like, no. And I'm like, so how do you expect me to be married to somebody like that if you wouldn't even keep a friend like that? Like, this has got to stop. And he actually ended up telling me at that point that was one of the scariest moments of his life, because he believed me, and he should have, because in that moment I was believing myself. But there was also times where it's like, gosh, come on, can't I, go to the gym again? And it's like, well, I'm not ready for you to go back to the gym. I don't feel, that doesn't make me feel safe. Like, go to the gym at the firehouse or whatever. You're like, do whatever. But I think the important thing is, if we didn't have group and community, if he didn't have a group of guys, because sometimes he'd be so upset with me, and then he'd go to his group and he'd come back. He's like, they all said that I need to listen to you.
They all said you were right. Yep. Yeah.
So I can't imagine doing it on our own.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. For somebody who just found out, and it's so strange, because I used to say, like, for the wife who finds out that the husband is XYZ, it's not that way. We've both been in this long enough now to know, like, it goes both ways. Like, for somebody who were to find out recently that their spouse has been, what did you call it? Sexual. I like how you said unwanted sexual behavior. Yes,
Right.
I really like that definition, because the addict doesn't want to be an addict.
No.
An
And sometimes
alcoholic
you
doesn't
don't
want to
even
be an
know.
alcoholic. Yeah, like no, yeah. And so I have a lot of I like how you put that. But if you find out all of a sudden that you're married to somebody who has and is experiencing unwanted sexual behavior that they genuinely feel like they cannot control, looking back on how you responded, the good things the good choices you made and the ones that you could have done better, what would those be?
For sure, I would have not read through his stuff.
Okay.
Because
Yep.
that jacked my brain up.
Yep.
And even still, sometimes I can't unread, what I read in his books. And he needed to have a safe place to process all these things with these guys that we trusted to help walk him through the process.
Right. There was somebody else that would have been better for that.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
For accountability, like even accountability software on the phone, that would have been great if he had if he had somebody that had a partner, or he had a partner that was a guy, that would help him. That would have been really good. I wish earlier we would have done more together. Like I remember about a year and a half in, I kind of just flipped out because I'm like, here I am learning so much about addiction and trying to understand your brain and giving you so much grace, but I don't think you've actually stopped to really look at what betrayal trauma is and what it does to me and I'm not just being an overreacting wife, but that betrayal trauma is the second most like severe trauma next to death. And it's devastating. I mean, we read it in scripture with David, and I just wanted him to understand that it wasn't just me. And so, I mean, I feel like we did a lot right. I think always I probably could have been a little bit more firm on some of my boundaries even.
Okay.
I think that would have helped it not kind of drag out as long, because it was definitely like a long recovery process. But the thing I like to say to women and men that, are coming to us, it looks different. So if it sounds intimidating to say, oh, the recovery process is 3 to 5 years, but year 1 looks completely different from year 2.
Yeah.
And you're going so much deeper than where you even started that you're going to start feeling joy and feeling better even several months into the process.
Right. At some point, it probably doesn't even become about the original scenario.
Right.
Which is so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that's another part for new people on their journey too, is like around the 4 to 5 month part of the process, it can look like it's worse and you don't want to give up. A lot of marriages will just separate at that point, and they'll be like, well, it's worse than it was when we even started, or we're just getting worse and we're just not liking each other even more now. And that's exactly what you were just saying, is the coping behavior, whatever hemorrhaging, bleeding out brought them in. Those are now, 90, 120 days kind of sobriety. And so now you're dealing with what the actual real issue was, because it was never about sex. Right. And so you're dealing with this, and that part is really hard. And now you also don't have your original coping skills that you were using. Right. So it can get really volatile, but it's really, really normal part of the process. So keep going, because it does get better.
Good. Like, I love that you said that. Like, when it gets worse, that's not the time to quit.
No, not at all. Nope. I just say especially if you're a betrayed spouse, I say, just give yourself the year to take care of yourself and allow yourself to not have to future plan everything or make all the decisions. Just say, I'm in a space right now where I'm going day by day, and I'm taking care of myself, and I'm working on my marriage, and I'm not going to make decisions right now.
Can we real talk sex when we're there it is. I got a yes before I even finished the question. We talk sex, intimacy, sexual health in a marriage, all those things, when somebody is still, on the precipice, or still, just like you said, even just has flashbacks of sexual betrayal. How do you and John go about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's really common. And we actually have a podcast just on it. It's called Sex During Recovery. I think it's like 57 or something, but
I'll link it. I'll link it to this one.
Yeah, because it's it's a big question.
Right.
And I think when women who have been betrayed come to my groups, and sometimes they're the women that say, I'm 40 years into my marriage and I don't have sex anymore. I don't like it. I sometimes see that there was either something they brought in or some kind of trauma, like a betrayal that never really got healed. And so that's what I was saying. After you go through recovery and betrayal, support for her or him, and then you have to come together and like learn a new normal, because probably what was there before is not. And so really practical things of, one thing is when women orgasm, they bond. When through oxytocin, when men orgasm, they bond, they want to mate, guard, or protect through the vasopressin that's released. And so even if they're orgasming to something like porn, that's what they're bonding to, not their spouse. And so that's also why I tell women that come into my group to be careful with masturbation, because you're going to, even if you're not using porn, you're setting your arousal template up to something else that's not your spouse. And so we have to go back to having sex, just probably like the normal way, missionary style. Like eyes, eye contact.
And was that
little
hard
bit of
for
light.
you? Is that
no, it's never easy.
Okay, so did you have to kind of make like build yourself up and make yourself be like, okay, no, I'm married. I'm in this. We're gonna recover.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and that was hard.
Yeah. It was very hard. I mean, I literally, I would say if you're like fresh in trauma, it's okay to not have sex for a while, like that's okay. So once you're kind of, I'm talking about when you're getting past that and it's time to start, like my one friend, Jackie, she's on our speaking team. She says, it's time to start being naked and afraid again. Like it's a real thing that you have to build up to.
Yeah. And you're not telling women who are in the thick of betrayal to go and do this. Right.
Yeah. Like when you're that weird in between.
And how did you know when that was?
Well, I knew because my mental health. So if I found myself in stages where it's like, I'm just really loving him, I'm feeling trustworthy. One of the things that I've heard is you don't have sex with somebody you don't trust. And I feel like that's just a good rule of thumb, because if you're still in this very untrusting situation with your spouse, you don't know if they're lying, you don't know if they're sleeping around, you don't know if they're visiting prostitutes. Then when you go to be sexually intimate, which is like the most vulnerable thing you can give them, there's going to be part of you that's incongruent to how you're feeling, because we just don't naturally open up and relax with people that we don't trust.
Right.
And so physically or, emotionally. And so if I found myself like, okay, I'm trusting that things are good. It's feeling safe. We say emotional intimacy needs to precede sexual intimacy.
Right.
So if I'm feeling all kinds of craziness and chaos and betrayal and sadness during the day, that's probably not a good night to have sex. But if I'm emotionally doing well and we're communicating, even if there's stuff that's hurtful, but we're communicating, we're working through it. And so I've even told John, there was a time where it was a year later after his last relapse, and I said, I am still not the same. So there's still parts of me that some nights I am like sad and I don't want to have sex with you, and which was not the case before. And then I said, and that part of me that's like totally free to the wind, like I'm married, I can just rip my clothes off and be free with you. That part is gone right now. And I told him, I know it will come back, because it's come back before. We've been through this before, but it normally takes me over a whole year to even get back to that place. And that's if we're both doing the work. And so it just doesn't look the same. Like he knows I'm a little scared. There may be times where I'm just like not feeling it because maybe I got triggered during the day and that's not what I need.
And do you communicate with that with him? Okay. Yeah. And how is he receptive to that?
Yeah, he's very, very receptive to it. And
he's sensitive to what you've been through. And
and I think that has to come from just him having guys too, that he, and there's actually a time where I had to realize that part of my people pleasing love addiction thing was sex is what I thought made like equals that we're doing well. Totally. And so clearly that wasn't the case, because he had this whole secret like setup behind, scenes. But I would say, like, I need to not equate sex with doing well. And so there was a time after he relapsed, and actually I was like 2 days later, I was thinking, oh, I hate how we're feeling right now. I hate that we're not talking. We should just have sex and like make this all go back to normal. And that's not a healthy behavior of mine. And so I had to communicate that to him too.
Sex doesn't make it normal. Sex doesn't make it. Yes. It should be.
It doesn't, because it just, it ends up, I think, feeding those women who end up having that sexual shame or anorexia, because then they're doing something with their bodies that doesn't line up with their heart and mind in the moment. And so it starts making sex something that is a fear. And that's
almost
why
a self-betrayal at that point.
Yes, it is. And then it makes the sexual anorexia worse, because now you're just avoiding it because you've confused your brain with like your body.
So because like we talk to women all the time, when you talk about sexual anorexia, I would say like by and large, most of the women I talk to be super honest, don't like sex at all. I don't know if that's your experience as well. Is. Okay. So we're taking a little left turn here, then I want to get back to your story. But for what just you talking about sexual anorexia and like for the woman who dreads nighttime, right? Who dreads bedtime. I know I talk to women who have never orgasmed. I talk to women who just dread bedtime because they feel like it's the duty, right? Yep. Because if I don't do this, he'll go look at porn, right? I'm sure you've heard all of these things, right? Yeah. If I don't perform, but they hate it. What would you say? Like, let's do a left turn for just women for women regarding sex.
See, this is going to be open invite to anybody listening. I really like to hear a little snippet of people's history. Yeah. I would ask them specific questions because, and I would help them point into the right direction. Like I'm ultimately going to say they need a group of some kind. Okay. I don't know which group I would put them in until I talk to them. Yep. I had a friend call me and say, what do I do? My 3-year-old keeps touching her vagina and putting her hands in her pants. And she told me how she responded. I said, I wouldn't suggest to respond like that, because now she's associating something very negative and dirty to a part that she's going to need to open up. That sounds weird.
No, but I am tracking. No, absolutely.
She's going to need to have that part be something she's not ashamed of. And so we have to be careful in just even how we talk about body parts. Absolutely. We don't call it dirty. Nope. We don't yell at her. We just say, oh, take your hands in your pants and let's go wash your hands and let's go play Legos. Let's go outside. Just like if they're picking their nose or, whatever. Right. And I feel like there's stuff even like that. There's things that were either said or not said in their family home. If their parents never talked about sex, then that alone can put a shaming feel on it, even if it was never talked about in a negative way. If they learned in church, one of the things I heard from my youth pastor, bless his heart, I love him so much, but it was the black or white, like save yourself for marriage. If you don't, you won't be pure and those kinds of things. And so
sign on this dotted line and everything will go great for you. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so like, and then the other thing is like what we talked about before is we get this fantasy. And so I don't know what kind of books they've read. I don't know what kind of ideas they've had about what a husband's like.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But then when that happens, we're training our brains to have that be what we look forward to turn us on or whatever. And so then when our normal husband comes in, it's like, it's not tracking because, because maybe I've read this fantasy, this romance novel, and that's what I expect. And I don't even know. And so there's so many different little pieces that could be playing in a woman's history. I feel like it really takes something like going through the unraveled curriculum and piecing it apart. Do I have sexual shame that I'm carrying from my church background, from my home? Is there something that embarrassed me at a certain age that associated? Do I have sexual trauma? Was I sexually curious with other friends or girls? What are my expectations? What did I have in mind before I came into marriage? And then I just remind those girls too that that's not what God designed us to be like. He did design us to have sex and enjoy sex. And so like whether you're on this end of the pendulum or this end, we need to get to health because that's how God designed it to help the marriage thrive. And so even if you don't like sex, we need to try to figure out how to get you to a point where you do enjoy being physically intimate with your husband because your marriage needs it.
Right.
And so, and some of it, it's just, it could be like if they have fear, or if they have shame and then they have sex, and then that can start causing pain during sex, or that can just start causing anxiety. And if a woman is anxious, if her amygdala is turned on, if she's in a conflict within 24 hours, her amygdala is turned on, and that has to be shut down and quiet in order for her to experience orgasm. It's such a brain thing. And so there's all these things like,
right.
Are you guys but as they go through the resources in the group, they start to see all that. They start to see all the patterns. They start to see the lies. They start to see, like maybe there's some physical things that they need to tweak and adjust so that they can experience orgasm. Because if you're having sex and no orgasm, that's not very fun.
Yeah,
so of course you're not going to look forward to it.
Yeah. It's just a job you're doing to try and keep your husband and not look at porn. That's not what our marriages should be.
No, not at all.
That is not the end goal here. And so I am so grateful for you and your honesty about all this, because I just want this like for every single, I mean, especially as Christians, like we should be like, we should be very happy, sexually fulfilled, like living God's design, right? Like,
I agree.
We should have that. And so, but if we obsess over the Notebook for too long and
exactly. That's just not even.
And Ryan Gosling isn't in our honeymoon suite. Then
right.
And Ryan Gosling wouldn't even do it either. That's the thing. And I think that's where he wouldn't work. It wouldn't work if it was him.
It wouldn't work either.
It wouldn't work either. And I think that's like the main thing is like, man, we all it's not just men and porn. It's we all can buy into these ideals and ideology or what is the word? Like ideologies.
Yeah.
We can all buy into these ideologies that just are not reality. But isn't the reality the best thing? And I think I read this on one of your blogs, but like you can't no woman can compete with porn.
No.
So
and we expect to go on our honeymoon and be like porn stars. And it's like, no, this is where you sit down and you say, okay, this is the start of probably a very awkward journey. We're going to figure out what we like, what we don't like.
And that's the beauty of it.
It is. And I try to encourage some women that, they'll talk to me and they're like, I just don't think I like it. I just don't think I'll ever enjoy sex or have an orgasm. And sometimes I'll ask them like, have you ever had an orgasm with or without your husband? And most of them always will say yes, without. I'm like, then you're not broken. We just need to figure out what it is, like where the disconnect in your brain is. Because as soon as you can match that function of your body up with being connected and intimate sexually with your spouse, then it is going to change things for you. It's going to start becoming something that you look forward to.
Yeah.
We just got to figure out why, like, what's the hang up? Is it mental? Is it shame? Is it, who knows?
Right. That's so good. That's so good. Okay. So back to you and your husband's journey. Clearly you both have a grid about you. What do you think he would want to say to women who are trying to like removing you from it? What would he say to a woman who is struggling with sexual like betrayal or trauma?
Yeah, that one I would say, I know he's a big proponent for using your voice. We're afraid to use our voice because a lot of us are afraid to use our voice because we're afraid we're going to make it worse. Or we have been in a marriage with an addict who's gaslighted and manipulated us so much that we have a history of every time we do say something, it getting turned back around us and it making us feel so insane. We decide just not to say anything anymore. Yeah. And so I know that he says those were his biggest moments for him, were when I just really put my foot down and said, I do not deserve this. I do not want this. We are getting help. I will not live in a marriage like this. This has to change. And he says that those were his best moments for recovery. And which was surprising because it does take time to get there. And so sometimes with women, when they're coming into my groups, we just have to try starting them with something small. Like it's really hard for them to know what they need and know what they want. And a lot of times that's confused with doing things for others. And so that's why it's such a process to figure out what they need, because your spouse, my husband said, when I wrote him a list of the things that I needed to see, that really helped him, because we have this thing called, it's a tool called 3 circles. And in the middle is the relapse. It's like the place you don't ever want to go again.
Okay.
the center ring is the one that is like kind of the slippery slope, the guardrails, like it could lead you to relapse, not necessarily the relapse, but it could, like maybe going out to bars would be one. It's not necessarily the relapse. Well, maybe it is for you, but it's not necessarily the relapse, but it could lead to it, or watching a rated R movie or something like that. And then the outer circle is all stuff that leads you completely away, like doing healthy activities, hiking, going to church, meeting up with your accountability group, being open and honest, those kinds of things. And so I told John at one point, I said, you feel like you're doing awesome because you haven't relapsed in a year. As far as I know, who knows? I don't know, because I believed you before. And so you think you're doing great. And so you've eliminated that center, that middle relapse circle, and you're feeling wonderful because you don't live in there anymore. Well, before I knew what you were doing and before you started getting healthy, I only ever saw the outer circle ones of things you did that kept you away, and the middle circle ones, like staying up late, white lies. And so even though you're not hanging out in the relapse circle, I still only see those middle behaviors, and it gives me anxiety because that's what I saw before. And so he really like appreciated that visual, because then it's like the more you're hanging out in the outer circle and doing things that I know directly lead you away. Like when I wake up in the morning and I see you reading your Bible instead of playing a video game, that does something for me. It's like, oh, he's living in a healthy space right now. And so he said, understanding what the consequences were, helped him, understanding how I felt, understanding exactly what behaviors he did that contributed to anxiety and fear in me, and which behaviors he did that made me feel relaxed and stable and attracted to him, helped. Because he's like, I don't know. I need you to tell me.
You gave him parameters that he could work within and feel like he's getting wins.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, I know that you want to have a healthy marriage. I know that you want to have a healthy sex life, but these things create anxiety in me. And they lead me away from that feeling in my marriage. And these things create stability in me and make me feel safe. So you get to decide how much time you want to spend in each, category, but I've literally written it out for you. So you know. And I would also say, you can let me know too. Like, what do I do that makes you feel like
That's where I was going next. That's why I was you are so on it. I was just about to ask you, like, and how does this go back towards what he's going through and what he needs from you?
So he would tell me things like one of his trauma triggers, I guess, from childhood is like feeling like he's getting trapped or caught because he was falsely accused for things. And so that's like a wound for him. And so he would say, please don't try to trap me or catch me. Just ask me, or we can put parameters on if something needs to have like accountability. And so I'd have to reframe some of my questions to be questions instead of accusatory.
That's
so
good.
Just like little things like that. We really had to compromise on things like, okay, well, should you go back to the gym? Okay, here's the benefits and it's healthy. And so one of our compromises was, yes, go to the gym, because he's a firefighter. He gets paid to go to the gym. So like, yes, go back to the gym. But one of my things is when we're in an argument and you run out the door and slam it and you go to the gym, that creates anxiety. And so as long as the gym is something that's predictable, it's like a workout schedule, then that to me shows stability and makes me feel safe. When we're fighting and you run out the door and go to the gym, or you went this morning and then you're going again, those are the things that create anxiety in me. So if we can agree on those parameters, then I'm okay with it. And so we just had a lot of conversations like that. And I found the other trick with my boys, I do have the one that will ask me all the questions. And then my other one's the listener, but he's also the one that really applies the information he hears. I found they do better if I let them have friends over. And that's why starting at fourth grade, I started doing something called Muffin Monday, where they had late start every day. And I let all the boys come over and eat muffins, and we do a devotional. And then it turned into, as they got older, we did pizza and sex ed. Yeah. They had a little group chat. And of course they're boys. So it was like group chat, and it said sex ed at the top. And I think I had like a banana or something. And I'm just like, and I make sure all their parents know, like, hey, and I'm Christian, and this is going to have a Christian, tone to it. And and so they they do better because a lot of times their friends will ask the questions, or they like that I'm inviting their friends over. And so I always involve friends if I can, because my boys will do better with the information and asking questions. Instead of just those two sitting down.
Right. Like, sit down. We're going to talk about sex. It's like,
yeah.
But yeah, when their friends come over and their friends think you're so cool and you made the muffins and you're the cool mom, then
then they'll ask whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
I did not grow up with like that before Christ, after Christ testimony that traumatized me as a girl, because I was like the teenager sleeping around. And I still loved God so much. And I just couldn't figure out why I couldn't stop doing these things. And so those kinds of testimonies, although I very much know that they're true. And in some aspects of my life that's happened. Other things like just our brokenness and our humanity, I feel like my struggles got to a boiling point that brought me to my knees and made me take the time to go figure out why I do these things and why I'm basically not trusting God with these issues. I'm going to other things, other idols to fill this brokenness. And so I had to rewind and figure out what brokenness I had first, because I wasn't even sure. And then I had to figure out why I had that and how I was filling it and not trusting God with those areas. And so I'll tell my women, it's like, yeah, you have this big moment that brings you to the point where you're finally going to stop, listen, and let God show you who you're supposed to be before you started acting out in all these ways. But we're still going to be vulnerable until the day we die. We see those struggles in everybody that's in the biblical history. And so it's more about 100%. Just going through, I go through this stuff. I learn all these tools. I learn my own vulnerabilities. I learn my own lies that I hear from the enemy, because there's like 5 of them that just replay. And I learn all that stuff. And that way I'm aware of it. And as I go forward in life and I start to get derailed by busyness or temptation or whatever, I can recognize it and then bring myself back on the path. It's not like I'm an addict and now I'm not, or I'm sober or now I'm not. It's that we are constantly being refined and sanctified. And so now we understand how we act out, and we can use those tools so that we can continue to refine ourselves because we're never going to be perfect. And so it's not, I just, I don't get too stuck on like, I'm an addict or not. But the thing is that the tools work and they don't take away from God.
No, not at all.
At all. Like when I told you that I read the Bible and I was asking for help and nobody knew how to help me, I started to feel like a bad Christian because I'm like, okay, well then it must be me because I must not be trusting God enough because I'm not feeling better. And I realized I needed tools to help me see where I needed to make a change in my own life, because God sometimes asks us to do work and change and work on change.
That's absolutely
and where do I need to let things go that I'm trying to control that I really shouldn't be controlling? Where do I need to let those things go for God? And that's what the resources in the group helped me with, was having support and helping me know when I shouldn't be controlling and I should be letting God handle something, and when I should be making good, healthy control and making some action steps.
And it's the group that really helped crystallize that for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We can't do it alone. There's a real theme here in the last hour and a half. We cannot do this alone.
Yeah. I mean, and I've said it before, it's in one of our resources. Like when we say things out loud in a safe group, it's really healing. It like lights up these different parts of our brain that can't be lit up like that if we're just doing a study on our own or trying to do something on our own. And that's why sometimes when you say, oh my gosh, I just realized that as I was telling you, like, something, but it's like, it comes to like this brighter realization when you're saying it out loud to somebody. That happens all the time in group because there's a real healing process that comes from saying things out loud.
That's so good. So for any woman, just dealing with their own like betrayal trauma, or for any woman who feels like they're severely like lying to their spouse in an addictive behavior, like where would you point them? I want to get all your resources out there, and I'll link these as well when it airs. But
yeah, so puredesire.org is the website, and there's buttons all over it that says join a group. And so you can either search for a local group in your area. At church, or you can join one of the online groups. I personally love that because I do my group at 6 a.m. and I'm done before my kids even get up.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I love it. So, so you can join a group. Our Sexual Integrity 101 video course is our 8-week session. And I feel like that is such a good just starting place because it will explain what the groups are, explain what types of groups, but it also does 2 DVDs on the brain science.
Oh,
it does.
That's so real. Yeah.
It matches those scriptures with what's going on in your brain. So you can start to understand when God said this is actually what's happening in your body, in your brain. It's really, really good. It goes through some of our key tools, and those tools are free on our website. So somebody really could watch that and then go to our website and get some of the free tools. But ultimately, if that's all very confusing, they can reach out directly to me because that's what I do. If they're a woman,
awesome.
They can reach out to me. And like I said, I'll hear where they're starting from. They can either email me or call me and point them in the right direction, whether they're a leader or somebody needing help. And then my coworker, does the same thing for men. Awesome. And you can find us on the website under the groups.
So puredesire.org. Find them, y'all. Like this is a game changer. We should prioritize our sexual health.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's worth it.
Like it's worth it. Like we can learn how to argue and we can learn how to set boundaries all day long and we can learn how to stop treating each other like children in our marriages, but let's also prioritize sexual health. Like this is what, like, it's supposed to be great. That doesn't, I hear you clearly. Like this does not come without work or problems, but it's gonna, without work, what I think I heard you say, or maybe I read in one of your blogs, what was it? Like, if you're not getting better, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. There's no stagnation.
That's it. There's no stagnation. So let's move forward, y'all.
Yeah.
Ashley, you are amazing. Thank you so much.